Alright, welcome back to the Old Soul Millennial channel. Tonight's video, I got a fun project I'm working on. Probably not going to finish it tonight, but I'll try and I think we'll be able to finish it in this video. What am I working on? I'm working on installing LED rock lights or puddle lights to the 2020 F250. It's an XL, it's the peasant truck. It doesn't have any of these fancy features as the XLT and the Lariat and the King Ranch and the Platinum. I don't have any of those fancy accessories, but I'm slowly going to build this XL into a Limited. Just you wait. We already added the heated seats, so we're slowly getting there. But before I get into this video, I'd like to ask those of you that enjoy watching this content, please consider hitting that bell icon. I think it's next to the subscribe button if you haven't hit it already. That way you get notified when I upload new content, as well as it helps the channel grow. So I'd like to expand this channel. Anyway, why do I want to add these LED rock lights? Well, for two reasons. One is safety. When myself or my family is getting out of the truck at night, it's very dark and the only ambient light that we have is whatever light kind of spills out of the cab. And with the running boards, the steps, that hides some of the light underneath the steps, so you can't really see where you're stepping. So safety. And number two, it just looks badass. I'm going to be adding at least 8 of these lights, and it's really totally going to transform the truck. So I want these lights to come on at two times, two ways. One, whenever the rear bed light comes on, because that bed light comes on when I open the door or when I unlock the truck, and it goes off after 30 seconds of having the door closed or whenever I hit the lock button on the remote. So I want these to come on with the bed light. Now, the second way I want these lights to come on is on command. I'd like to be able to throw a switch and have these lights turn on while I'm driving down the road if I want to look like a tool, which everybody wants to look like a tool every now and then, or attract attention to themselves. I'm not exempt to that. So here's the thing. If we want these lights to be able to come on, aside from when the bed light's on while we're moving, we're going to have to figure out another way to power these lights. Because of the safety features on the trucks nowadays, if you hit that little button, which most of you should have it if you have a pickup truck, there should be some type of way to turn on the bed lights in the back of your truck. Well, on these modern trucks, there's a safety feature that prevents you from turning on that light while you're driving, because they don't want you blinding the people behind you. So that creates a challenge. How do we power these lights without turning on the bed lights and the other interior lights of the truck? We don't want to backfeed that circuit while we're driving down the road. And here's the answer. These are called diodes, which these are basically one-way check valves for electricity. And I've actually drawn up a diagram as to how this whole system's going to work. So let's take a look at what we have here. Here are the rock lights. These are the rock lights that I plan to install underneath the truck. Obviously, to have a complete circuit, we need to have a ground, so that's what the black wire is here. Now, we need to power these lights with 12 volts. So there's two ways that you could wire these up to work with your bed lights. Now, if you don't have pre-wired puddle lights in your vehicle, which on a 2020 plus Superduty, there is pre-wiring for that, and I'll show you where to find that because that's what I'm going to tap into. But if you don't have that, you're going to have to find the 12-volt wire that feeds your bed light circuit, which that isn't really difficult to find. All you have to do is pull off some of the paneling in the back of your truck behind the rear row of seats, and then you just have to track down what wire supplies power to the bed lights. And be careful you don't tap into the brake lights. Make sure it's the white bed light circuit. So those are the two ways that you can tie these puddle lights into your bed lights. Now, if you want these lights to come on command, as well as when the bed light comes on, you need to have some type of switch. So I'm going to wire these up to a second means of power via one of my upfitter switches. So whenever I flip that upfitter switch, it's going to supply power down this line, and therefore completing a complete circuit with the puddle lights. Now, the issue is, if I don't install a diode in this line, what will happen when I turn on the upfitter switch, that power is going to backfeed. It's going to backfeed up into the bed light circuit. So what would happen, and I don't think it would cause damage to the vehicle, but it could potentially cause damage because it's really not great to backfeed. But what that would do, whenever I'd flip this upfitter switch on while driving down the road, it would turn on at least the bed lights. It may even turn on the interior cab lights, and that's just something we don't want to happen. So how do we stop that current from going back up the line? How do we prevent that backfeed? And once more, that is with a diode. And these are the diodes right here. So what I'd like to do right now is give you a quick demonstration as to how a diode works, or how this whole system's gonna work. So if I tilt the camera down, I have my power probe hooked up to one of these rock lights. I have obviously the grounding side of the power probe grounded to this light, so we have good ground. And on the power side, I have this little jumper on the red power side of this rock light, and then I have a diode. Now with the diode, on one side, there is going to be a line, and that is the blocker line. So if I tried to apply power to this diode right now, if I apply 12 volts to this, see, that light is not coming on. But if I take this diode and I flip it, notice that that little line is now on the light side. The red, it's on the light side, not the feed side. It's on the receiving side. When I go to apply 12 volts to this light's going to come right on. So this is an awesome tool to have in your arsenal for projects like this. Now, if you are installing these rock lights on a 2020 Plus Super Duty, like my truck, Ford has actually made it quite easy to add these lights to the truck. Here's why. If you pop out this piece of plastic trim, which is located on the passenger side as well as the driver's side, on both sides of the truck, you will find a connector that is pre-wired that sits right down here in this little clip. Now, that connector is directly tied into the line that turns on the bed lights. So when you open up the doors, power is supplied to this line. Now, they've also made it really easy to get this wired down underneath the truck. If you reach your hand underneath the floor, my finger is right about here, you will find that there is a rubber grommet right here. So to get the wires from here underneath the truck, all you need to do is go from the underside, cut a little slit in that rubber grommet, and then you can run your wires down underneath the cab. But as you remember earlier, I need to install a diode on this line because I want to have a switch on the other side of this line. So once again, if I flip that up there switch and I supply power back up into the line, I don't want that to backfeed. So this is where I'm going to install the diode. It's going to be nice and protected in the cab. That way we prevent any backfeeding. Alright, so I'm making really good progress on this project. I have the diode installed here, and it is protected with some heat shrink tubing. I didn't bother to record that because it's pretty self-explanatory. The way I wired in the diodes is I used these non-insulated crimp connectors, and I actually soldered that joint, and then of course used heat shrink tubing to enclose the diode as well as those connections. So, I mean, they're already protected because they're underneath this piece of trim, but now they're going to be extra protected, and because we have a soldered connection, I'd expect that to last the life of the truck. Now, after that diode, the wire goes through that grommet that we were talking about, drops down, it's run along this bracket right here in split wire loom, comes up through a pre-drill hole in the running boards, and then it comes at the end of the running board right there because there's an access opening at that end and an access opening at that end. So I'm going to install 3 rock lights on this running board. I've already pre-drilled, I want to say they're probably 3/4 inch holes here at the end and in the front. So I want to use one wire harness and just sneak that through the running board so it's nice and clean and hidden and protected. And then I'm going to have drop down wires in which I can make my connections to the rock lights. For example, here are the drop-down connections that I'm talking about, and I'm going to show you how I do these. Alright, so I'm going to show you how I make my connections or my drop-down lines off the main power and negative side of the harness that I'm making. So what I like to use these. I was opposed to these in the past, but lately I've actually been using these, and I really like these connectors. So these are an all-in-one connector. There's heat shrink, there's glue, that's the blue, that's the glue, and then you have low temperature solder in the middle of this connector. So what I like to do, I like to feed this heat shrink low solder connector down along the wire past the point where I want to run my drop down. So I've determined this is where I want to run my drop down wire off this harness that I'm building. From there, I'll take a pair of automatic wire strippers. What I'll do, I'll clamp onto this wire, turn down the pressure knob, because this knob controls how firmly this tool grips. So I'll turn that down, and what I'll do is I'll actually spread an opening in the main wire harness. You see, we haven't cut the main wire harness, we haven't compromised any of the copper wires, we just basically spread apart that jacket. And from here, I have a pre-cut drop-down wire. So simply I'm going to strip this. Got to turn up the tension. Still a little bit low. There we go. See, we have a little strip section. I'm going to go back to my main wire harness. I'm going to take this, line it up, then without twisting this, normally we like to strand that copper wire, but I'm going to leave it loose, and I'm just going to wrap it around the main harness. Going to keep it very tight. Do a nice connection like that. The final thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take my wire cutter / crimper tool, and there's a smooth end up here to crimp insulated connectors. So the final thing I'm going to do is take that smooth end of the crimp tool, I'm going to crimp down, and I'm just going to spin it. And what that's going to do, it's going to tuck any single-stranded copper wires that may want to poke through that heat shrink. It's just going to tuck them in down close along the main harness here, so it's not going to poke through this heat shrink low solder connector. So the final thing I'm going to do, just going to sneak this connector, going to have that solder sit right over that joint. Finally, I'm going to take my heat gun, and we're going to solder this. Good tip, don't use any type of open flame when you're trying to do these low solder connections. You really got to use a heat gun, otherwise it's really not going to come out properly. And that is going to last for a very long time, if not forever. The harness is now complete, and as you can see, I have string run through the cavity inside the running board, and that string drops down in the locations where these lights are going to be. Thankfully, I caught that one because it's just about ready to pull through. It should be okay. So there's one in the middle, one on the end, and the one up front I should be able to get with my hand. So let's start pulling this through. Alright guys, I just finished up this project. I really would like to get some video of this truck going down the road, but I'm just so exhausted and I kind of want to wind up this video. So when I take my remote, hit the unlock button, isn't that beautiful? I think this came out fantastic. And these lights, once again, they come on with the rear bed light, as well as, well, the truck's locked now, but if I unlock it, whenever you open up the door, these come on. And then also, when I go in the cab and turn auxiliary switch, I wire these up to number 2, they come on. Now once again, we have that diode installed, blocking the backfeeding of the power from auxiliary switch number 2. So when I hit auxiliary switch number 2 on, the lights come on, but the bed lights don't come on because we have that diode, right? Because that prevents the backfeeding of that electricity. So this allows me to drive down the road with these lights on, which is awesome. So if I shut this off, there's another little button on the instrument cluster that turns on the bed lights. If I hit that, these lights also come on and they go off gradually. Just took the key out of the ignition, so if I were getting out of the truck at night, as I open up the door, the lights come on. And I gotta say, they just look absolutely beautiful. Really nice install. Really transforms the truck, and I think it makes it look really unique. Really happy with how these came out. So that's it for tonight's video. Thanks for watching. And as always, I hope you enjoyed this video.